I'm very happy to be here, but I don't want to stay here alone. So I'm asking the panelists of this panel to please step forward. We're not going to do a walk of fame as we did in the first panel. I would like everybody to be sitting here right from the start. Very good. Hey. Nice to meet you. Hello, nice to meet you. Bill? Yeah. Hey, Bill. Hey, Bill. It's yours. So, no business model in media. We just heard. But this session here, fortunately, is not just about media. It is specifically about business models of orchestras. Of course, knowing that there are many, that there isn't one that fits all, or maybe there is. About what's working, what isn't, and why. About what we can learn from other people's experience in different parts of the world. And in order to tackle this important topic, I'm very happy to introduce to you the distinguished panelists we have assembled here today, two very successful orchestra managers from both sides of the Atlantic, and two equally successful and very experienced orchestra musicians and union representatives. I'll start with the far left from your point of view, Markus Rudolf Axt from Bavaria, Germany. He is the intendant of the Bamberg Symphony, the Bavarian State Philharmonic, since 2013. An intendant in Germany, for those of you who don't know this, is not only a manager or a CEO, but also the artistic director of the orchestra. Before that, he was artistic assistant at the Teatro Comunale di Bologna and the Komische Oper Berlin, managed the artistic office of the festival Young Artists Bayreuth, was special advisor for the Schleswig-Holstein Music Festival, artistic director of the Beethoven Fest Bonn, and finally director of artistic planning with the Berlin Philharmonic. Additionally, for many years, he was a correspondent for the Kulturmanagement Network and led various workshops for cultural and orchestral management. He says his present job as intendant of the Bamberg Symphony was a wonderful one and a great challenge he's enjoying year after year. Next, I would like to introduce Jennifer Mondie from the United States. Jennifer is a member of the viola section and the chairman. It says in the bio, I think maybe it's rather chairwoman. You don't call it that way? Okay. That's maybe a European perspective. Of the orchestra committee of the National Symphony Orchestra in Washington, D.C. Until recently, she also used to be a member at large of the ICSOM governing board. Jennifer says that some of her colleagues in the NSO would rather take leave without pay than play some of the POPs programs. While she believes our guidance should be what will make our patrons' time most enthusiastically spent. Next, I would like to introduce Robert Massey from the United States as well. Robert is currently President and Chief Executive Officer of the Jacksonville Symphony, which just a few months ago announced an unprecedented 5-year collective bargaining agreement, expanding the symphony seasons from 35 to 40 weeks and increasing annual musicians' wages by 37%. Yeah, it's true, we don't hear that very often. But maybe that's why Symphony Magazine called him the Steve Jobs of the orchestra industry. Or maybe because his statement about the orchestra business is as convincing as it is simple. He says, music is the product, but engaging the community in symphonic music is the business. Unlike Jobs, however, Robert didn't start his career in a garage, I believe, but as a trumpeter with the Memphis Symphony while still a teenager, and eventually he put himself through the New England Conservatory by ushering at Symphony Hall. Later on, he became cultural attaché for the American Foundation in Paris, and has held leadership positions with several orchestras in the US, such as the President's own US Marine Band, the Washington National Opera, the Washington Band, Bach Consort, and Orchestra Iowa, where as CEO he led the institution through catastrophic floods. But he'll tell you the story himself, I'm sure. Last but not least, my very good colleague Bill Kerr from the British Musicians Union. He has been national organizer for orchestras of the BMU since 2003. Bill used to be a member of the first violin section of the Halle Orchestra in Manchester for 14 years until he started working full-time for the union. He is currently responsible for negotiating the terms of all UK orchestra collective agreements, both employed and freelance. Bill will be talking about the self-governing London orchestras, where the musicians are shareholders as well. According to him, players and managers say about this business model, quote, "When the system is working well, it works very well." Of course, Bill will also tell us what happens when it's not working well. I would like to invite Mr. Axt to start with his intervention, please.
Thank you very much. I think everybody here in the audience knows Bamberg and knows where Bamberg is. And if not, I see the first ones Googling, oh no, it's not Hamburg, it's Bamberg. First I should start with the commercials to explain everything to you. Bamberg in Bavaria is a perfect jewel of a city in the very heart of Europe. A UNESCO World Heritage City in its 1,000-year history, Bamberg has produced stunning architecture, a Holy Roman Emperor, a Pope, and a world-class orchestra. Admired for its characteristic, deep, rich, yet brilliant sound, the Bamberg Symphony thrills audiences all over the world, from the US to Japan, performing both the great classical repertoire and cutting-edge modern and contemporary music. Truly an extraordinary orchestra from an extraordinary city. Since I took over this job 4 years ago, I focused a little bit on storytelling for the orchestra, also because we have been on the market for a long time, and we are more touring than playing in Bamberg itself. So I think storytelling is very, very important for us. As you see, Bamberg is known to somebody, but not to everybody, and things change. So we should look back into the history to understand our structure. Founded in 1946, the orchestra is based in a city with just 70,000 inhabitants and with nearly 10% of the population subscribing to the orchestra. The orchestra has roots in Prague, as the majority of the players who founded Bamberg Symphony in post-war Germany had been members of the German Philharmonic Orchestra in Prague, which used to perform in the German Opera House already during the times of Zemlinsky, George Szell, and Gustav Mahler. The legacy roots further back to the 18th century, when Mozart's Don Giovanni was premiered at the opera in Prague, 1787. So more or less this orchestra of Don Giovanni in the Estates Theatre has changed place and name, but the core of the orchestra has survived into lovely UNESCO Bamberg after Second World War and is still there with a specific sound quality. 230 years of history, but nevertheless also a young orchestra. And in its 70 years of existence as Bamberg Symphony, we have become the musical hub of the whole region, but also we have become one of Germany's most traveled orchestras, the first German orchestra to tour after the Second World War, and until now we have made up over 7,000 concerts in more than 500 cities in over 60 countries, 62 in fact, worldwide, and we are acting as a cultural ambassador for Bavaria and for Germany. The orchestra had been run as a registered association for more than 50 years, until a change in the subsidy structure has given the chance also to change the structure of the organization. Since 2004, we work as a foundation of public law, created by a law issued by the Bavarian Parliament, in which also the percentage of public funding has been defined. That's very interesting because the parliament in Bavaria has established this law with the majority of all political parties to create this foundation for the orchestra. Due to this law, the state government of Bavaria is obliged to pay 80.5% of our total subsidies, the city of Bamberg 12.3%, the regional government in Franconia, which is the northern part of Bavaria, 6.2%, and the district 1%. Every year, the state government would announce an annual quota to increase the subsidies based on the general inflation rate. This helps us to guarantee the salaries of our players. We have actually 109 musicians in fixed unlimited year-round contracts, plus 10 persons in the management. And so this is absolutely safe in the funding from the state. We need to find extra money for special projects, for international tours, who are deficit building, as we just heard, and also for our orchestral academy, which consists about 10 players in a 2-year scholarship. Our total annual budget is around 17 million euros, of which 75% are public funding. So this is a very luxurious situation in comparison to what we have heard beforehand today. And I'm very happy to be able to work in such a situation. This system is working very well, but also because there are some special details to guarantee the success of the system. This is first the political situation, the budgetary freedom, and the legal structure. First of all, the political situation. Bamberg is quite a wealthy city, and it's situated not in the center of Bavaria, but a little bit in the outskirts. And as you might Googled now, it's just in between Munich and Frankfurt, a little bit north of Nuremberg, a little bit west of Bayreuth, what had been mentioned today as well. And there's a political will to sustain a certain amount of public and cultural life outside Munich in Bavaria. Most of the money goes into Munich. That's same situation like in France with Paris, I would say. So most of the money, most of the companies, everybody is centralized in Munich, and the rest of Bavaria, which is quite a huge state, is not funded very well. In our case, the Ministry of Culture has created a fund which supports 3 cultural lighthouses. That is the State Opera in Munich, then the Wagner Festival in Bayreuth, and Bamberg Symphony Orchestra. Those 3 cultural lighthouses have been politically safe from any major budget cuts during the last decades. Second, an important issue for us is the liberty of budgetary freedom. Despite of the public foundation structure that we have, we are free to enjoy the budgetary freedom within the frames of the annual financial plan, which means if we spend less money on salaries than expected, for example, because we have some vacancies in the players within the orchestra, then we are officially allowed to use this money to invest in projects, touring, marketing, and so on. This is the only way we are able to cope with our budget, because we officially don't get any money for project or marketing, but just for salaries. Then the legal structure of the orchestra. The public donors, state, regional, district, and city government are represented in the board of the foundation. So my job is to report to them directly, and they would permit the annual budget of the orchestra. My official position as intendant, as Beat Santschi has already told you, I would translate this as artistic and executive director, probably. This allows me to take responsibility on both sides. So I'm also responsible for the budget officially as chairman of the foundation. Apart from this freedom, we have created a series of institutional participation also for the orchestra. Everybody of you will know that you cannot run an orchestra with taking lonely decisions without involving your musicians. So there are several groups within our orchestra whom I consult regularly, which is the 5-person orchestra committee, orchestra board, mainly for artistic reasons, the 6-person human resources committee for any problems with personal questions, the chamber music committee, who is also artistically supporting our chamber music series, the education committee for a lot of events we do regularly within the community for every age of education, and they also advise and create their own projects. And recently we also had a 15-person committee for the search of our new music director. I believe the trustful and open-minded participation of the players in those different fields of the management helps up to keep a common and creative discussion, which generally is based upon everybody's understanding to look for the best solutions for the development of the orchestra in the future. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus. It seems Bavaria is still a very nice and healthy country, and there aren't too many problems. Let's see if this translates to the National Symphony Orchestra in Washington. Jennifer.
Is this okay?
I hope it works.
I didn't plan to speak quite so in depth, just because in my myopathy, it's I assume that everyone understands the American business models, the orchestras, and so I was trying to talk to everybody I could think of, every executive director I could find, our artistic director, what even is a business model? And there's a lot of there was a lot of opinions about what that is. Is it, and depending on who you're talking to, our artistic director said, well, it's how much classical versus how much pops you're putting in, that's their business model. Our marketing department said, well, it's how much you're spending on what. Our executive director just showed me the numbers with a lot of red in it, as she usually does. But and I'm sure that Robert can do a much better job of this because he's running an American orchestra. American orchestras are obviously not, for the most part, publicly funded. In my orchestra, National Symphony, we get a lot of, well, you must have a lot of government money, but we don't. We just stole the name and use it proudly. We live in the Kennedy Center, which makes our lives very difficult and different from a lot of other American orchestras because we have this literally overarching building under which there are a lot of different, there are 11 different venues, concert venues, and we are one of the founding we're one of the artistic partners. So all of our funding funnels through the Kennedy Center, and oftentimes we feel like we're fighting the Kennedy Center to get money for us, but they pay all of our bills, so at the end of the year, we're one of the few American orchestras that doesn't have a deficit. The Kennedy Center is often not happy about that, but we don't have a deficit. But all of our donors and sponsors also have a very complicated system within the orchestra and the Kennedy Center to identify where their dollars are going and what they're being used for. And as we heard, media is now becoming such a huge deal, and it's just imperative for us to tell our story. So how we tell that and how we identify ourselves to the rest of the world is becoming more and more important, and the Kennedy Center can help or can hinder, depending. We try and just keep talking. So what I've noticed when I talk to people around the country, the last several years have been there have been a number of historic orchestra labor disputes. Lockouts were not just weeks, but many, many months and more than a year. They've tested us across the country as we watch our colleagues struggle in various orchestras. Looking at the orchestras that have made it through the other side reveals a lot of hope, I think. Atlanta, Detroit, and Minnesota are each in new eras of new growth and record support in all their communities. And I think the record support in their communities is so very touching and very important. What grew from these awful times were new pathways of communication, often new managers or executives who could look at a whole picture with fresh perspective and start to unravel old knots of contention. There are also renewed interest in substantial collaboration, not reluctant collaboration between the musicians and the managers. At the National Symphony, we're in the middle of quite a large transition. We're transitioning between music directors. Next year we'll have Gianandrea Noceda. And we are also transitioning between executive directors. We had no problem. We're quite proud of our old executive director, but she has moved on. But it makes an environment where we can look at everything and try and start again. And what the music director will be responsible for and how much investment he will have in everything and not just the classical concerts is Noceda seems to be very eager to take quite a large role, and we're very happy to have that. Our interim executive director, Elizabeth Warschauer, has been this tornado of activity with so many ideas and making sure we talk to everyone. There's marketing. We could not get a meeting with the marketing department to save our lives, and I've had 3 now in the last few months. So she's been instrumental in getting everybody to talk together, and that, I think, has made all the difference. Now we know which faces are sending us emails asking for things and why, and it's very heartening. We hope that when we identify a permanent executive director, that will continue to be the trend. So the most interesting, from my perspective, of the areas where we need to talk together are balancing the artistic imperatives versus the financial ones. It's the trickiest and the least quantifiable, since every market is dependent on its own circumstances. There's no one lever, I think, that you can pull in any big American orchestra, little, any of them. They have to figure out their own mix themselves. But there are several that you can, and once you do find a good mix, then when things are working well, things are working well. It's a great quote. I'm going to use that for the So how this manifests for me is arts versus entertainment. How much are we artists? How much are we entertainers? Both DC and across the country, the general concert experience is more important. People want to go and have this experience of being in the concert hall. How are you going to support that? How are you going to make it an experience instead of just being able to watch it on TV at home, which is great, but people want to be in the first row. I mean, the reason you put a camera in the first row is because people want to be in that first row. So how do you translate that exciting experience to as many people as possible and get them to come back? The Kennedy Center has not been doing that very well, which just makes it a great opportunity. So we're hoping to seize that. And of course, my colleague in the LA Phil, Meredith, the LA Phil does a great job of that. Yes, you do. So that's pretty much all I have to say, and I look forward to talking with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I would like to move on to Robert, if you'd like.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Beat said, I am a recovering trumpet player. Also, I think something that's probably more important is that my wife is a career violist, and you know, while there are musicians who go into administration that may lack some of the administrative skills, I do think that we see a lot of orchestra managers that don't understand, have the passion, have the empathy for the musician side of the story to really be successful. So we talk about business models, and for me, you know, I start by thinking, okay, you know, why do we exist? You know, we probably have some sort of mission statement that says, you know, we're going to perform symphonic music and make the world a better place. I think the earlier discussion they had about, you know, how do you market your value in your community, and especially when you're competing with, you know, organizations that feed the hungry and you know, clothe the poor. And I like to remind people that there are organizations out there saving the world, and then there are organizations like ours that are making sure that the world is worth saving. And so then we look at the who. You know, why are we here? And what is that economic driver? Because we are a business, and even though that's sometimes a dirty word, we are. And for us, it is about connecting people to symphonic music. I remind my organization all the time that, you know, we can play Beethoven symphonies all day long. It's not until we actually put somebody in front of the orchestra and have them listen to it that we've done our job and that we've fulfilled our mission. So what kind of tangible experiences can you gain? I wanted to give you just 3 kind of short stories about 3 completely different organizations and how they looked to really address and readdress their business model that moved it to success. So in 2005, I was living in Washington, D.C., and I got a call to come be the executive director of the Washington Bach Consort. It was a small organization. It had a $400,000 a year operating budget. They had lost they were running deficits of $40,000 a year. They had done that for about 5 years, and they had run out of money, and they were about to close down their doors. So, you know, I went in and I looked at, okay, what can I find about this organization? And the thing is, they were an incredible ensemble that no one heard of. They did not market their materials, their concerts. They did not. They played in a church that was actually hard to get to in Washington, D.C. And if you did get to the concert, the program would basically be printed on an office copy machine. And so what I wanted to do is mirror the artistic integrity that people saw on the stage into everything that the organization did. And so we had really nice brochures and concert programs and websites. We started advertising. We did a couple concerts. We slowly pulled out of the church, and we played, you know, at the Kennedy Center, at the Music Center Strathmore, at some recognizable venues. And people started coming, and corporations started wanting to have their name attached to us because they saw that value. And I was very happy. In each of my 3 years there, we posted a surplus. And when I left, the organization had grown to an annual operating budget of $1.1 million. So then in 2008, I moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where they were also floundering, as most orchestras in the Midwest were. And 13 days after I got there, the city was under 9 feet of water. So we lost our concert hall, we lost our building, which was adjacent to the concert hall, we lost instruments and computers and every kind of, we lost archives, we lost everything. We ended up moving the office into a funeral home for a year. And so we really got to rebuild the orchestra. We rebuilt the building, we rebuilt the theater. The building that we owned, we'd previously had our offices on the first floor, and then above it was some empty warehouse space. And so what we did is we ultimately moved our offices to the 3rd floor. On the 2nd floor, we created a music school. And we provided music instruction to about 400 students a year. It became a whole new business for us. And then on the ground floor, we created a 99-seat concert hall, the Opus Concert Cafe, where we would do chamber music, we would do jazz concerts, we would do cabaret, and we got to work it out that we punched a hole in the wall so that when we were doing concerts at the big theater, this would become our VIP donor space and really give them an upscale place to congregate at intermission. And so not only did we rebuild our facilities, we really rebuilt ourselves. We were forced to go out and find new venues, and not just venues in Cedar Rapids, but in Iowa City and in areas all over eastern Iowa. We changed our name to Orchestra Iowa. And when I left there, that organization had grown from $1.5 million to $5 million operating budget a year, and was seeing surpluses. So then I went to Jacksonville Symphony just about 2.5 years ago, and Jacksonville has a very they have a very rough history. They've posted deficits constantly for 20 years. And with the exception of 2007, 2008, when they had an operating budget, but that was because they locked out the orchestra for 6 months. So I do not recommend that as a business model. So, you know, first thing is I really had to come in and work with the board and look at, okay, how can we turn this around? The last 2 contracts had been concessionary, and in fact, it had taken the orchestra down to 35 weeks. Players were making less than they were 15 years earlier. I mean, this was embarrassing. If I'm going to use a sports analogy, so if the Jacksonville Symphony was a baseball team, it would be a AAA minor league team, and we would probably be ranked 17th of the 18 orchestras in our class. And so we posted a principal second violin audition. We had 9 applicants. And so this is not a way to build artistic excellence. So we really wanted to look at how can we turn this around. And for us, we used the catalyst of a new music director, new executive director, and really looked at how can we rebrand the orchestra. And then we started launching some new projects. So we had a happy hour concert where it was informal. People would come into the hall. We had a big screen up. We installed 4 HD cameras, and so you could see close-ups of the musicians as they played. And then after the 1-hour concert, we cleared the stage. We brought in 4 portable bars, and everybody in the audience grabbed a drink that was included in the price of their ticket. The orchestra musicians stayed. They grabbed a drink, and for an hour, they had a post-concert reception, and it was all about this experience. We started doing a lot of movie concerts where we show a movie and we play the soundtrack live. We collaborate with everybody we can collaborate with. We worked with the Science Museum, who was doing actually it was a children's museum. They were doing an Anne Frank exhibition, and we brought over the Violins of Hope, which were 16 instruments that were restored from the Holocaust, and so impactful. We sold this concert out, and we take the orchestra out of the hall. We do community concerts. At Christmas time, we took a pared-down version of our holiday pops to Mayo Clinic, and we performed in their auditorium to a sold-out, standing-room-only audience of caregivers and patients. And at the same time, the concert was simulcast to every room in the hospital, to 1,000 rooms. And you just think, this for many was the last thing some of these people saw. I mean, this is our value in the community. We matter. So we used this, and I think innovation is, it's a verb. You have to orchestrate innovation. If you asked, if Henry Ford asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. When Steve Jobs and Apple created the iPhone, none of us knew that we needed an iPhone, but now none of us can live without it. So how do we replicate this in our symphony orchestras? It takes a lot of education. Remember, our boards are comprised of volunteers that don't understand what we do. I mean, how many of us had had the conversation of, wait, we're paying what for 20 hours a week? I mean, they don't understand, and we have to walk them through this. They have really good intentions. Education is also about transparency. Be very open, building trust. Everything we do, we have musicians, staff, and board involved, whether it's a party, whether it's a committee, and I think that's really helped. And so with all of this, you really have to keep motivating. Nobody wants to fund a sinking ship. I've never gone out and tried to raise money in the guise of saying, if you don't donate to us, something bad's going to happen to the symphony. Even when in the flood, that was actually the case. People want to be part of something that they can get behind. They want to get behind something that they are excited. So what we do is we create exciting programs. We really focus on what the community needs. Do they need more Pops concerts? Do they need more education concerts? And then we launch these programs. We market the hell out of them so people know. There was a comment earlier about, wait, we already do these education programs, but if nobody knows you're doing it, it's not going to help. And I tell people, don't fear failure. We're going to make mistakes along the way, learn from them, move on. This is how wisdom is brought about. So with all of this excitement, we passed a $50 million campaign. And this campaign is really the impetus between on how we can get to this contract. Because for us, our strategy was, let's make the musicians happy first, because you guys don't understand the impact you have. Our audiences love the musicians. This is, to this date, and I'm a little still working on this, but in my 25 years, nobody has ever bought a ticket to see me manage. So if we focus on making great art, we let our communities know, we focus on serving the communities, they're going to get behind us. And I'm happy to say that in just 2 years, we've raised 80% of that $50 million goal. So, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. But maybe some people actually bought tickets to come here to see a manager. You never know. Might be a primer. And then, of course, last but not least, I'd like to invite Bill.
Thanks, Beert. Good to be back in the IOC. Good to see so many familiar faces from previous IOCs, and good to see so many new faces as well. So, welcome to Montreal. I'm going to talk about a slightly different style of business model. I'm going to talk about the self-governing orchestras in the UK. In London, England, there are 4 symphony orchestras that operate a different business model to the normal employment model seen in most other orchestras in the UK and throughout the world. The London Symphony, London Philharmonic, Royal Philharmonic and Philharmonia orchestras are self-governing. The self-governing orchestra is a company with a limited liability and is a registered charity. The orchestra is managed by a board of directors made up of the orchestra committee of the board, which are usually between 7 and 9 orchestral members, plus the managing director and up to 5 external directors. The chairman and vice chairman of the board are always members of the orchestra. The members of the orchestra committee of the board are elected by their colleagues to serve for a set period of time. A musician accepting a post in a self-governing orchestra has to purchase a share in the company and so become a shareholder of the orchestra. As shareholders, the musicians are entitled to vote for their musician colleagues to become members of the board or to stand for election themselves. Unlike their salaried colleagues in employed orchestras, the musicians in self-governing orchestras are paid as if they're self-employed freelancers and receive a fee each time they play rather than a salary. The musicians have to commit to a minimum agreed amount of work, usually between 60% and 80%, of the 500 to 600 work sessions offered to them each year. Being in London, there's always a large pool of accomplished musicians to act as deputies when core members of the orchestra are absent. This system allows sufficient flexibility for members to be able to plan their performing lives in ways that enable them to fulfill their creative potential while remaining members of the orchestra. A well-planned system that permits members to select varying amounts of work means the orchestras can attract the highest quality musicians in London, for whom orchestral membership would previously have meant abandoning chamber music careers and other high-quality artistically fulfilling endeavours. This system provides players with great flexibility whilst controlling the cost to the organisation. So, the artistic and financial policies of these orchestras are, at least in theory, controlled by the players and executed by professional managers. The board committee of players hire and fire, consult on repertoire and guest artists, and on the selection of the principal conductor. When the system is working well, say the players and managers, it works very well. When it is not working well, that's another story. Ernest Fleischmann, who was famously executive director of the Los Angeles Philharmonic for 3 decades, managed the London Symphony Orchestra from 1959 to 1967, and the experience left him with negative feelings about orchestral self-government. "I had responsibility without authority," he said. "I was employed by the players, but I had to manage them. Managing an orchestra is a 16-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job. You can't do that and play an instrument in a great orchestra. It's like asking a patient in the hospital to be the doctor." On the other hand, Sally Maitlis, in her 1997 paper entitled Decision Making in British Symphony Orchestras, writes, "The player directors in the London Self-Governing Orchestra considered themselves responsible for the major artistic and financial decisions of the orchestra and did not take their positions lightly. However, most were very open about their lack of understanding of accounting and other financial matters discussed in board and management committee meetings. They saw the managing director and external members as critical decision makers in these matters. The managing director was influential in the self-governing orchestra. Although employed by the players, which was factually correct, the managing director was not solely driven by their instructions. Being knowledgeable, he or she took responsibility for decisions concerning conductors and repertoire and for income-generating activities, including long-term strategic initiatives, whilst maintaining a close working relationship with the orchestra chairman, whose understanding of this side of the business was also considerable." In her 2001 thesis entitled Models of Self-Governance and Workplace Democracy, a comparison of select orchestras in Germany, the US and UK, Erin Lehman identifies a number of traps or difficulties that must be dealt with in order to attain a truly functional and sustainable level of self-governance, including the need for widespread trust and technical knowledge, and the ability to handle internal power struggles and conduct peer reviews. In arguing the other side of the issue, the author discusses the advantages of self-governing systems, including a sense of ownership throughout the organisation, and not just in the executive offices or the boardroom, less mental stress for the musicians, a sense of common purpose that we're all in the same team, pulling in the same direction. Everyone shares in the success or failure of the group, more participation in decision-making, and less hierarchy and increased player job satisfaction. There are some downsides for the musicians. If the members of the orchestra believe that a colleague's playing capability has declined, that player can be removed from the orchestra, have their share refunded and be put out on the street without the legal protections that an employed musician benefits from. Also, musicians must normally retire at age 65, whether or not they wish to. However, there are exceptions to this. Maurice Murphy, whose playing is immortalised in the opening bars of the Star Wars theme tune, remained principal trumpet at the London Symphony Orchestra until the age of 73. I'll give the final word to a musician. A former player chair of the LSO sums it up this way. "This process of self-government, applied over many years now, has given the individual members of the orchestra a sense of being part of creating their own future, a stake in their own destiny. It means that the orchestra has an incredible ability to move with the exterior forces affecting it, while still keeping its eye firmly on its artistic goals. It is flexible, but never loses sight of its first principles, quality and innovation in everything it does." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Now, it sounds, in a way, like a convincing model. Musicians create their own future. And as Robert has said, let's make the musicians happy first. So I'm wondering why this hasn't been done in other places as it has been done in London. And I would like to open the discussion among all the panelists, whoever would like to contribute to this. It's a very special, interesting model, but obviously it hasn't found many copyists.
It's a whole lot of work, right? I think we can, it's hard to get people to run for committees, and this is a whole lot of work. So this is a great model. I wish we could explore that, but between the whole lot of work and the lack of significant job security, that's a tough sell in the United States. Would it work in Germany?
By the way, excuse me, I would like to invite everybody from the hall also to start coming to the microphones. We will open the discussion with everybody very soon. Please.
Germany is different in this way because we have, I think, 130 now, right? Professional orchestras in Germany who are subsidized orchestras. We have a handful of self-governing orchestras as well, like the Deutsche Kammerphilharmonie, like Mahler Chamber Orchestra. And they are really struggling because it costs a lot more money for them to create concerts to offer on the market than with the normal subsidized orchestras. And also what you said just now, it's quite difficult to get people involved. We are quite happy with the lot of musicians involved in different committees, but I know from colleagues in other German orchestras that sometimes it's very, very hard to even get the orchestra board replaced every 3 or 4 years when they have to re-elect it. So it's difficult, yes. And also we have a history in Germany of, well, musicians being employed regularly, being hired, also being not being used to take over responsibility. The bigger orchestras, the orchestras who have a modern management, who are visible on the market, also like Berlin Philharmonic or where I've worked, they have lots of committees. They also engage. But I know other orchestras where this is really, really difficult.
I would also add that in the United States, we receive probably about 75 to 80% of our funding from contributions. And a lot of that comes from individuals, and a lot of that is driven by individuals who will take a place on a board of directors. And so without that kind of governance structure where you have basically investors contributing significant resources to have a musician-run organization in an environment that requires such just deep philanthropy, may be difficult as well.
I was also wondering, Bill, of course you are not only dealing with these orchestras. You heard before, you're negotiating all the contracts with all the orchestras in the UK, most of which are not self-governed. So I'm quite sure that you also have maybe some personal arguments for the other model, for the traditional model. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think the self-governing model only works in a very large city like London, where there's a large pool of very capable musicians permanently on hand. I think working in a self-governing orchestra can be difficult, and it's often the case that people will work with one of the 4 big London symphony orchestras for maybe 20 years, and then they will want a quieter life working at the Royal Opera House or a salaried orchestra where they get a pension and paid holidays and stuff. So it's not for everybody, but it's a model that works in London. It maybe would work in big cities like London where there is a big pool of players. Certainly outside of London it wouldn't work, and the employed model is really the only viable way of keeping a permanent orchestra together in the UK outside of London. Also, it's a fact that over the last 10 years there's been less work available in London for those orchestras. So more and more they work outside of the UK in Europe, earning money for the orchestra rather than working in London.
Yes, thank you, Bill. And I'm really surprised that just 2 minutes ago I was looking over here and nobody was standing in front of the microphones, and now there's almost 2 long lines already. So let's start with Yves first. Microphone, first microphone.
Oui, vous m'entendez? Je me suis pas présenté avant, donc je suis Yves Sapir, je suis président du syndicat des musiciens français. Voilà. Le thème de votre débat, c'est le modèle économique des orchestres. Je constate qu'évidemment, il y a une diversité de manières de gérer les orchestres et de les faire vivre, de les faire survivre parfois. Mais on est face à une réalité qui est soit il y a de l'argent public, soit on va chercher de l'argent auprès de sponsors ou de compagnies. Mais il y a une réalité, c'est que si on veut faire vivre un orchestre permanent, pour faire une programmation dans la diversité des répertoires, on ne peut pas avoir, enfin je ne connais pas de modèle d'orchestre rentable, qui dégage du profit. Et ça, c'est ça le modèle économique d'un orchestre. Et je pense que c'est bien quand même de l'affirmer en premier lieu. Un orchestre ne peut pas être rentable, sauf si on change l'ADN d'un orchestre et on change son mode de fonctionnement. On a eu 2 interventions avant, une de notre ami mexicain, l'autre de notre ami de la compagnie Stingray, qui nous proposait des perspectives apparemment enthousiasmantes pour sortir de cette situation en proposant des opportunités qui nous permettraient de rentrer dans un marché. Enfin, je ne suis pas économiste, mais je vous conseille, pour ceux qui ne le connaissent pas, de lire un peu les conclusions d'un économiste qui s'appelle Baumol, la fameuse loi de Baumol, qui dit en gros qu'il y a 2 types d'activités économiques. C'est celle du secteur archaïque et celle du secteur progressif. Le secteur progressif a la capacité de pouvoir, par la technologie, par des nouveaux moyens de production, d'accroître sa productivité et donc sa rentabilité. Le secteur archaïque est un secteur qui ne peut pas, par nature, développer des moyens technologiques ou des moyens qui lui permettraient d'augmenter sa productivité. Nous faisons, et je suis désolé de le dire, mais nous faisons partie de ce secteur archaïque. Et face à ce secteur archaïque qui est sur une constante, c'est que les orchestres sont des orchestres qui ne peuvent pas produire de rentabilité, il y a un certain nombre de gens qui nous proposent des nouvelles voies, soit effectivement de nous mettre dans un marché, soit éventuellement, pour certains moins sympathiques, de réduire les salaires des musiciens, de nous faire voyager dans des bus et de manger des sandwichs pour faire des tournées. Je pense que si on veut faire en sorte que la diversité des répertoires soit maintenue, si on veut faire en sorte que tous les publics puissent avoir accès à notre production, il faut que l'on admette que notre modèle économique est un modèle économique archaïque et que cet archaïsme-là est moderne. Et que j'appartiens à un orchestre, et je vais arrêter, j'appartiens à un orchestre où nous avons beaucoup d'interventions par le biais d'Internet. Nous sommes sur Mezzo, nous sommes sur Medici TV. À chaque fois que nous jouons pour Medici TV ou pour Mezzo, à chaque fois que nous faisons des tournées, c'est-à-dire à chaque fois que nous sommes dans une concurrence internationale, le répertoire que nous défendons est un répertoire du mainstream, le répertoire des grandes œuvres. Et pour pouvoir exister sur ce marché-là, nous sommes obligés de défendre ce répertoire qui est un répertoire international qui va faire venir beaucoup de monde. Lorsque nous sommes sur notre territoire, lorsque nous défendons notre métier auprès des populations sur l'ensemble du territoire, nous pouvons faire de la musique contemporaine, nous pouvons faire des créations, nous pouvons faire des actions pédagogiques. Et tout cela ne peut pas exister si on considère que les orchestres peuvent être dans un modèle économique rentable. Et je pense qu'il faut qu'on admette ça. Après, chaque pays, chaque continent a son histoire, mais admettons ça peut-être comme conclusion de ce débat. Merci.
Merci Yves. I would like to ask you, all of us here now, from now on, that we please stay very concise and as short as possible so that everybody gets a chance to say something. Anybody wants to react? Yes, please.
Yes, I'd like to remind my board of directors that we are a very archaic institution. You know, it takes the same number of musicians, the same amount of time to perform a Beethoven symphony today as it did 200 years ago. And so it's hard to improve on efficiency. I do think, you know, what we have done is really looked at diversification of programming. So we have a classical series, we have a pop series, we have, starting next year, we've got a great partnership with our National Football League team, the Jaguars, that are, they've created an outdoor amphitheater that's covered, seats 10,000 people. And so we will have a whole new series there. So we look to our community, and our community is very very diverse. And so, you know, what kind of African American artists are we featuring? What kind of Latin American artists are we featuring? And then we have the same diversity in our classical programming. And, you know, unfortunately in the American education system, you know, the arts have been basically pulled out of the schools. And so, you know, about a third of our programming is education-based. And we view that we really have to develop this culture for the next generation. And you know, where we are seeing a young audience come. You know, whether it's the happy hour concerts or the ticket prices, the under 18 free, the movies, or just we have a music director who is really engaging. We have hope, and so I hope there's others that out there seeing the same kind of movement.
Thank you, Robert. Please, the microphone in the back there.
Francine Schutzman, president of Local 180 AFFM in Ottawa, Ontario, just down the street, 2 hours. I just wanted to point out, as a matter of clarification, there are at least 2 self-governing orchestras in the United States. One is Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, and the other, thank you, New Orleans Symphony. I don't know to what extent they are still. Louisiana Philharmonic, pardon me. Okay, they became self-governing probably in the early 80s. I do believe they have a hired managing director now. And just so people know that the model has been tried elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Anders?
Yeah, thank you. I have 2 short questions. First to Bill. Bill, you described among these self-governing London symphonic orchestras that some of the musicians left after a short time, after a few years. Was that because of money, salary, wages, or was it because of the well-functioning or not well-functioning of the model? That was my first question. The second question is for Robert. Robert, first of all, thank you a lot for your description and your emphasis on liking or loving the musicians. Of course, this is candy in my ears. And it seems that you have a good start by being married to a musician yourself. I appreciate that. But now, I try to think practically. If I invited you to Denmark from Jacksonville, Florida, and I ask you to give a lecture to Danish orchestra management, I mean opera, radio, regional orchestras, how would you attack this challenge or this thing? You get 2 hours in Denmark, here you probably will get a minute. But I would like to, it's from a pedagogic way of thinking, how do you persuade these human beings to start loving musicians? Thank you.
Anders, in answer to your question to me, I think there's a variety of reasons, but I think basically London is a very expensive city to live in. And so to earn enough money to have a decent standard of living, you've got to work quite hard in those orchestras. And some people don't want to sustain that intense pressure their whole life. And so they want to move to somewhere where there's slightly less pressure. I think that's what it comes down to. For other musicians, like I say, like Maurice Murphy, he was still there playing away at 73 quite happily. So I guess it's different temperaments as well. But to sustain a decent living, you've got to work quite intensively.
Without having the background on you know the environment, you know it's foreign to me because I mean I've done this work my entire life because I love it. I mean, I get paid to go to concerts. I get paid to talk to people who love symphonic music. And, you know, I grew up, my hometown is in Memphis, Tennessee. And this is a really sad story that just what they've gone through. And I remember one of my friends sending me a sign, and it was posted, and it says, you know, remember, no musicians, you know, please stay out of the donors lounge at intermission. It's for donors only. And I'm just thinking, wow, I mean, you so don't get it. You know, audiences are coming to hear symphonic music, and they're coming to see the musicians that perform that music. I mean, we encourage our musicians to come into the donor lounge. Now, if we're getting ready to play Mahler 5, our principal trumpet player is probably not going to be in there. But on Pop's concerts, you know, they're in there a lot. And we even took this to a new extreme. So our big annual gala that we do every year, we sell tables, and the tables are $5,000 a piece, and we sell them to either individuals or to corporations. And the tables, they get 10 tickets, and the tables are of 12. We put 2 musicians at every table, and we invite, on our cost, every member of the orchestra to be part of that event, because the audience, that's what they want to see. That's who they want to talk to. So I can't fathom why other organizations don't have that mindset. Whether you're on a board, this isn't what you should be spending your time on or your money if you don't get it, and especially if you're in management. You know, there's a lot of other fields that you could probably be better served at. So.
Thank you. Aha. Okay. Yeah, Alex then.
Thank
On
you.
the back.
Thank you. Alex Gascoigne from the BMU. I'll just reiterate my dear friend Bill's comments. It's wonderful to be back at FIM in the 4th IOC. Who'd have thought it? Congratulations to FIM, Benoit and John and your colleagues. Marvellous. I'm a violinist in the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra. The BBC has 5 orchestras and 1 professional choir. The license, we're funded by the license fee. The license fee in the United Kingdom takes in approximately £3.5 billion. The 5 BBC orchestras and the 1 professional choir cost about 1% of that. They offer extraordinary value for money. The great thing about that is we don't have to worry about funding. As long as the charter is there and the BBC want to spend money on music, which they do, then we don't have to worry about our budgets. We never go into deficit because we're not allowed to spend more money than we have. It's as simple as that. The BBC's basically core values are to inform, educate, and entertain. And the BBC believes that you can't just give people what they want, you have to give people what they need, which is what we've been talking about today. But of course, the BBC faces cuts like everybody else. Although we don't, one of the downsides about not having to worry about funding is that we have to give something back to the BBC. My orchestra makes about 65 programs for Radio 3 a year, 75 programs for Radio 3, 63 concerts a year. We tour, we do lots of online stuff. What we get accused of, unfortunately, is that round the corner from my orchestra, we have another orchestra called the Royal Scottish National Orchestra. And every time we try to do free children's concerts, we believe that the free children's concerts should be part of the license fee. The Royal Scottish National Orchestra says that's misuse of the license fee because we're undercutting that orchestra. So we are constantly trying to redevelop our program to give people value for money for the license fee, but not being seen to undercut other people. So we send out mixed messages almost. And I wanted to go back to Bill's point about the flexibility that self-governing orchestras gives players. You're absolutely right, Bill, that if you're self-governing, then players, as long as they do the minimum requirement, whatever that is, I don't know, 75% of the work or 70% of the work or whatever, then that's fine. When we had cuts in the BBC orchestras, and I know Simon Webb, the director of the BBC Philharmonic, is here, every BBC orchestra decided to make their cuts in different ways. The way the director of my orchestra decided to make the cuts was to have reduced contracts. So in other words, if you were getting into later in your career, in your 50s and 60s, or you had an injury, then you could cut your contract down to like 90% or 85%, which meant that when the Bruckner symphonies came up, if you were a violinist with a sore shoulder, you could take them off, which is fine to a point, and the BBC saved money on pension contributions, and it saved money on sick leave and all that sort of stuff. The downside of that is now that we often put out an orchestra full of extras and deputies. So the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra now, when we go out, we usually go out, it's a 76-piece symphony orchestra. We play 14-12 and triple winds. That often we have between 20 and 30 deps in a week now. And that's the downside that we've had to come across. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Yes.
Hi, I'm Dave Lee. I'm a horn player, British MU. So I'm one of those people at, I've worked in self-governing orchestras, the Royal Philharmonic and the London Phil. But I started my life off in the BBC on the contract orchestras you've just heard. Then I moved to the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and that was a provincial orchestra's standard contract. I then went down to the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and there's a cautionary tale, because whatever business model you've got under contract or self-governing, there's an effect on the musicians themselves, and I think it's very important that we accept that there's an effect on us as musicians. I moved to London, and for the first 90 days in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, I didn't have a day off. I mean, it's a great thrill. It was a marvellous ride. And the vast majority of those days, I was working three-tier days. That's in the morning session, an afternoon, and an evening. Frequently, a recording session in the morning, you get in your car, you drive, do a rehearsal and the concert somewhere else, you drive back to London, back to the recording studio. In those 90 days, I did 2 short tours. And thrilling, very exciting for a young lad like myself. But the thing I want to really sort of say is, where was the day off? There wasn't a day off. And if you do get a day off, frequently in London, the temptation to do recording sessions outside, the big films and everything else, they want you. You don't want to turn it down, they might not want you next time. So there's this thrill of being completely bound up in the system and the magnet that is London. And that obviously has consequences. It has consequences for your personal life, for marriages, for family life. And it's a cautionary tale from me, because I would say beware if you let the inmates run the asylum. Because, and here's the dilemma, because if you're under contract, we as musicians really do know that if you're under contract, you've got guaranteed money, you want to work as little as possible for that money. And it's possible to manipulate your system so that you work as little as possible. Now, if you're a self-governing orchestra, you're paid per call. And what you want to do is work all the time. What, a day off on tour? What do I want that for? I can have a fee for working. Let's get in a bus, let's go for 8 hours and do a concert and come home. So that's the dilemma. And as a musician, you pick up that instrument, you join an orchestra, whichever way it is, it's welcome to the asylum, isn't it? Thank you.
You always let me know if you want to react to something, right? Great, thank you. Please.
I have a question for each of the business models represented here on stage. It's really unique to hear about your respective challenges and how you operate in your markets. What I want to know for each of you is, how do you manage and plan for growth, and what does that growth mean for your organization?
Everybody's been addressed. Who wants to start first?
I'm not quite sure what growth means or should mean in this context. So if you would like to explain this, then I could.
Certainly. So I come from a small regional orchestra in Ontario. And right now, after a number of years of stabilization for my particular organization, we're asking ourselves, how do we grow our impact? What does it mean to grow? Does it mean more main stage concerts? Does it mean more outreach? How do we have a greater reflection of our community? Or are we going to every year play the same 12 concerts or however many? Presumably our colleague from Jacksonville did this when you grew your organization from 1.5 to 5 million. How do we do that safely, especially in Canada and the US when funding can be tenuous? And I'm curious about, especially I think our colleague from the States, how you did that, how you managed it, if it was planned or if you got an angel gift that allowed you to do these things.
So I'll say the first part of planning for growth or planning, and actually I'll address growth first, because I come from the school that we want to seek financial growth and not financial sustainability, because I think sustainability is that first step backwards towards failure. You know, if we're building a subdivision and we're building that 2-lane road that goes into that subdivision, you know, in 8 years, that's not going to be sufficient. So we need as organizations to really get ahead and say, not what do we need now to be successful, but what are we going to need to continue moving forward. About planning, the other thing that I think is very important is, you know, the symphony orchestra is a very unique beast. And so I view it as this like big glass sphere that I see that's this cultural ecosystem, because we have board members and we have donors, we have musicians, we have staff members, we have, you know, executive leadership, we have artistic leadership. And so whatever we do, we need to do together. Everybody has to take ownership, everybody has to be engaged. And so when we're looking at what we're doing, we have to do it as an entire organization. Now, how we managed growth, so in Iowa, which is a smaller, you know, orchestra that went from 1.5 to 5, we didn't set out to say, you know, we wanted to, you know, almost quintuple the size of our organization. We saw opportunity. There was no ballet in Cedar Rapids, and an hour and a half down the street was the Quad City Ballet. And so we reached out for a partnership with them that the ballet would work up a ballet. We'd bring them to Cedar Rapids. We would produce the ballet in Cedar Rapids. We took all of that revenue, and that basically funded the orchestra for 2 weeks. Then the next weekend, we would take the orchestra to the Quad Cities, and we would do the ballet there. And the ballet would take all of that revenue, and that would cover their costs. And so we ended up with this partnership that brought 3 weeks of services to our, actually 6 weeks of services to our orchestra. And because we had 2 markets, ballet actually, the ticket sales paid for itself. We also collaborated with the Cedar Rapids Opera Theater. Cedar Rapids had an opera theater just doing 1 production a year. They played to about 800 people. We brought that production into our facility. We put it on our season, so it now had the benefit of our marketing power, and it again provided, you know, opportunities for the orchestra. So it now had 2 weeks of opera that it did. So, you know, we looked at, we seized every opportunity we could. In Jacksonville, what we've done is, because I mean we've gone from 35 weeks to 40 weeks. I mean this is a big stretch, but we've gone from a 10 concert Masterworks series to a 12 concerts series. Plus we've added a gala in the middle of the year, and we've added an opening night gala. So we're giving our community more music, and we're doing it in a way that obviously by having more revenue opportunities come through the door, whether that's ticket sales or sponsorships, it's covering a good percentage of the costs of covering this contract. And then with the special campaign we're doing is we're raising money to significantly grow the endowment. And the endowment is really going to provide that permanent sustainability as we grow. And then, you know, there's now this amphitheater that's being built that we didn't even know about when we did our strategic plan. And so we've had to, you know, get together and adjust, okay, what does that mean for us? So I am constantly, whatever organization that I'm at, I'm looking at what are the opportunities, what are the threats, what's the challenges, you know, and how do we really set ourselves up to be in the strongest position possible.
Thank you, Robert. If there's no more people who want to ask anything or add anything to the discussion, but you're still welcome, I have a question for you. It has been said today, this morning, as a matter of fact, that classical music is something for the elite. So are our business models based on the needs of an elite, or are they for everyone? Marcus.
Partly yes, partly no, I would say. Of course, what we do is historically something which has been created by the elite 200, 300 years ago, which still is founded, is subsidized by the elite, if it's a private elite of sponsors and donors, or like in Germany, a political elite. but also everybody of us is trying to broaden our way through communities, through education, and also to show that orchestral music, that classical music itself is not an elitist thing. I think that's also the main point for us, why we are getting this fund, these subsidies from the political government and institutions, because we should be able to offer concerts for nearly everybody. We have very low ticket prices in Germany. The most expensive ticket for a normal concert in Bamberg is like 45 euros, but you can get in for 10 or 12 euros for the seats in the back of the hall. So this is a political price, of course, and it's the same in all the other orchestras and cities in Germany. It's the same in the opera, even much more important in the opera, because you have much more personnel to pay, much more salaries, much higher deficit if you look at this. So I think it is an elitist thing historically seen, but we're all working to get it as bright as we can.
Thank you. Would you like to say something?
Yeah. We spend a lot of time in the National Symphony and in the Kennedy Center trying to make sure that we are not perceived as elite, and our board spends a lot of time is very interested in funding programs that will touch as many people as possible. And we have a great board. We get along really well. This is what we hear all the time. How are we going to get more people here? You know, if it's just a matter of someone funding tickets to get people in the seats, then we have people that would be willing to do that. Sadly, it's not that easy. But we're making inroads. But I think it's very important, especially for an national cultural institution, that we not be perceived as elite, and that everybody supporting us works to make sure that it is accessible to everybody. And to the question before, what I perceived as growth, this kind of ties together, I promise. Growth for us isn't, we're not looking for more work. We have a 52-week season, but what we are looking to do is take what no longer works. It's transformation. Take the concerts that worked great in 1962 and don't work so great anymore, and make that into something that works here. And I think that goes to accessibility as well. And I don't quite know where you got that quote. I love playing the hip-hop concerts and put earplugs in, but it's great. People don't like it that much, but it is. Some people do, some people don't. If we had the receptions beforehand, I think we would all like it. We got to work on that. That's how to get musicians there. But that type of thing, even if you're not sure how much that's relevant to the orchestra world, trying those things and finding where the orchestra is relevant is an important thing for me.
Thank you. Did you?
I think the word elite is a very emotive one. If you win a gold medal at the Olympics, then you're an elite athlete, and that's a good thing. But if you stand to be president of France, then you're a member of the political elite, and that's a bad thing. So what do we mean by elite? I think listening to orchestral music is a minority interest. And I think that is a kind of practical thing, because if you're in a city of 1 million people and your concert hall holds 2,000, you're not going to get all 1 million people in if they come knocking on the door for a ticket. So I think it will always be a minority interest, but I think elite is a bit of a misused word, you know. And there's nothing wrong with minority interests.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem of the millions of people wanting to get into the concert hall, we've seen the solution before. Stream it. Can I take the next question? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Jennifer McDonald. I'm here from the Calgary Philharmonic. So we're a full-time professional orchestra of 66 musicians, and I serve as director of operations, director of artistic operations, so the planning and all the musician interests. I did come from a musical background. That was my training. With our staff, it's just under 30 people. My question to the panel, particularly Robert, would be how much of a role do you play when you're searching for whether board members or staff, like if they have that, do you search out people who have the interest in the classical or cultural artistic forms, et cetera? Is that a vital part of what you're searching for in staff, just so that they have the passion to keep going through a lot of the hours and that sort of thing?
Thank you. That's a great question, and it's hard to fill positions. In fact, Jacksonville, I feel like we're in this black hole that nobody knows about. I mean, we're kind of Florida, we're kind of not Florida. It's actually a wonderful city, but it takes a lot to recruit people down there. We include in our job descriptions under qualifications must possess a passion for symphonic music and a dedication to connecting audiences to that. That is something that we absolutely put out there. Now, if you're, if we have a CFO opening or a controller opening, we're probably not going to get somebody from the symphonic world, but we definitely, we ask, what's on your playlist, and have you been to the orchestra before? For people in development and marketing and operations, we are very clear that these are 60-hour-a-week jobs. I mean, and that's a light week. So nobody likes turnover, so we try to hire very carefully. And then actually, I'm not the best one to do it. Other people in the interview process, without me in the room, kind of say, look, this is the culture. You're expected to be at least one of the concerts we're doing every week. I mean, and in fact, they look at it as you get to be at one of the concerts that we do every week. Board members are hopefully the same way. Sometimes it's a little tricky because, X corporation kind of gets a seat on the board, and if we're going to get that $50,000 gift, they better be there. But certainly when we look at our boards, we do look to say, who's already coming to the symphony? Who are we seeing a proof of support already from? And we look at it that way so that the people that come onto the board really want to advance the mission. One of the things that I do is I always ask them, what committee do you want to be on? And so if they check off finance committee, I really scrutinize them because they're usually the people that want to come in, they flip to the budget, they actually skip over the revenue side, they go right to the expense, they break out their red pen, and it's like, oh, I can't believe we're spending this much on guest artists. And I say, can't believe, how many people do we need to employ? So, finding the right people is really key. It's the same, on the player's side. How many auditions do you go through that there may not be a winner because if you putting in the wrong person is worse than putting in no person.
Great, thank you. And I also just to the orchestra chair, I really feel like it's a really crucial relationship between the management and the orchestra committee, and that's certainly what we've tried to foster, certainly in the last 2 years in Calgary. And it's hugely beneficial, but I think in our case it has to do with really that lack of education, that I would love to see, major strides moved forward, but I think it's vital to have that integration. So I appreciate the hours that you must put in working with committees and with management, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you to you all.
Thank you for saying that too.
Okay, this will be the last intervention from the floor. I'm sorry. Kerr,
yes,
please.
A very brief question about your mission statement. Every orchestra has, at least in the US, a mission statement, and in Germany, more or less not. But do you really live your mission statement? Do you have the feeling that what you have stated once, what you see on the website, and I've screened many websites, and they sound some similar. We are relevant for the community, blah, 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 yeah, that stuff. But do you really, yes, well, but do you really live your mission statement? And do the musicians know this mission statement? How do you implement this? Because it's very often management stuff. But if you ask your musicians, what's our statement? Do they know this? So do you live these statements?
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's like et cetera, et cetera. You know, mission statements, that's probably, you know, you could spend a whole seminar on that. First thing is, I believe in paring down the mission statement as short as possible so that it is something that everybody can really understand and recite. So ours is something, it's as simple as, you know, to enhance the quality of life through symphonic music. I mean, that's it. You know, we make our community better by being there. Corporations move to Jacksonville because it's got an incredible symphony. It's got an incredible symphony hall. And the musicians that we hire, yes, you could hear them every week in the symphony hall, but you know what? They're also teaching your kids lessons. You can hear them play church, you know, at church. They form their own chamber music ensembles, and they put on concerts throughout town, you know, in the off weeks. We matter to our community, and so we do live it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Why not? Please.
It seems to me that we all have different models of working, whether it be in Europe, all of you have something different to share. And I'm just wondering, just trying to keep orchestras alive, we're trying to find this magic formula that works across the board worldwide, but that doesn't exist. So what I'd like to know is from all the speakers and all the managers here is, you know, we're sharing best practice here, we're sharing the things that we do, but do the managers themselves have their own forum where they can actually share their experiences that might help influence a different model in a different country? Does such a forum exist other than coming to FIM?
Yeah.
Well, in Germany there is an orchestra conference every year where all the managers of the German orchestras come and have something like this conference, but more for the management than for the players. What we do as well, we have lots of informal meetings with colleagues 2 or 3 times a year. And we exchange ideas, we exchange business models, practical tips, and so on. But that's not really like a conference. It's just we meet very informal, 12, 15 colleagues every time and exchange things. That's what I think is very helpful for us.
Bill?
I'm not aware there's an international forum of managers across the whole globe like there is of musicians in FIM. So, but I'd love to stand corrected, but I'm not aware of one.
I know the managers, you know, in the United States have the League of American Orchestras, and we get together, you know, on an annual basis and do try to share best practices. But one of the things that I often find, you know, we're missing some really powerful voices from the table. And, you know, for a bunch of managers to come together and say, well, how do we solve this problem? And then, you know, we're talking about problems that directly impact musicians, and then not have any musicians in the room to share this dialogue with, we're missing something. Right now, a big push in our country is diversity and equity, and how do we reflect our communities in our orchestras. Now, I can certainly do that on the board, I could do it on the staff, I could look at the guest artists and guest conductors I bring in, but you want to start talking about, you know, the audition can of worms, that's not our role to even get into discussions. And so I would love a format where managers and musicians and the AFM, you know, ICSOM, ROPA, we can come together to get, you know, more often, and we can solve these problems together.
Well, there's a plan for the future, apparently, on this continent.
Canada has Orchestras Canada. We're meeting right here with you now. Many orchestra managers there. And it's been going for a long time. And we used to characterize it this way. The managers get together once a year to laugh, lie to each other, and drink.
Well, that's a trilogy I haven't heard of yet. Thank you very much for this for these great interventions. Now, thank God, the human timekeeper is very more nice to us than the machine in front of me, and he tells me that we have almost 10 minutes left. Am I correct? So that I would like to use for our last round, and I would like to all the panelists to, well, okay, you decide. Anyway, so then it's going to be even shorter. So let's keep it to 1 minute, please, if possible, for everyone. I would like to know from you, what have you learned today in this panel? Because this is obviously also about lessons learned, about best practices, exchange. What are you taking home with you from this panel today?
I've learned something in both the panels today, also listening in the first panel, which is that it needs also personalities in management, like my nice colleague Robert here, like Alejandro from Mexico or Benedictus from Ghana. I think in order to succeed to our audience, to our supporters, we need somebody at the top of the management also who is a real personality, who shows his or her passion to the orchestra, to the music, and no, the same like the music director and all the players in the orchestra already does, but we don't need to have somebody who is not exactly the same type of passionate person up there.
Thank you.
I think what I learn at every IOC is that we've all got to pull together in the same direction and with the same objective. Without that, I don't think we just go around in circles. So if we're going to move on and find a way through the contemporary difficulties, we've got to do it together, and each orchestra's got to find its own way of working as a unit together rather than pulling in opposite directions.
Thank you, Bill.
I think it's important to understand that there is no one solution. You know, there's not a magic potion or a silver bullet. And those of us, you know, at least in the North American side, you know, if we hear the new model, or the, you know, we will run screaming from the rooms, and then everybody's like, oh, look what they're doing over there, and it's like lemurs, you know, or leopards, you know, jumping over the ledge, but we have to be open. We have to really understand what is our environment, what is our situation, and whatever we do to do together.
Thank you.
I think it's been re-emphasized to me that we need to foster flexibility and to look much more far forward than we would like to. Especially, thank you for the comment about being committee chair, that it takes hours and hours and hours, and you tend to just try and fix what's right in front of you that has to be fixed, and it's much harder to look and say, let's fix what's going to be a problem in 5 years now. Yeah, I got to deal with that, I will. But to have managers that are willing to look forward and try and find that path before it's forced upon you, I think I would like to start looking forward and be bold about looking forward. That seems to be the key to all of this. So.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, colleagues, I think this has been a very interesting and inspiring discussion. If I was a manager, I would have learned a lot. Now, I think we've all deserved a coffee break. As far as I know, that's on the plan now. But before we do that, I would like to thank all the panelists very, very much for their great contributions, and give them a hand.